The billionaire's hands trembled as he unlocked the vault that had guarded his family's darkest secret for 8 centuries. Layla, a waitress who had once been an archaeology student, was the only person in Dubai who could read the classical Arabic script on the crumbling parchment before her. What she translated in that private library didn't just rewrite his family history. It shattered the very foundation of his identity. Because this manuscript revealed that his obsession with a pure royal bloodline was built on a lie, a secret buried since the Great Famine, and the truth would bring a man worth $4 billion to his knees. Layla had never imagined she'd return to her true passion while carrying a tray of gold-flaked cappuccinos. At 28, she was just another waitress at Dubai's most exclusive restaurant, invisible to the sheikhs and tycoons who dined there. But 6 years earlier, she had been the brightest archaeology student in her cohort, fluent in classical Arabic and trained to decipher manuscripts most scholars couldn't even date. Financial collapse forced her out of university and into a server's uniform. Across the city, Sheikh Rahman spent his nights obsessing over a single locked vault. Inside lay an 800-year-old family manuscript, written in a cryptic script no expert had cracked. He believed it contained proof of an unbroken royal bloodline. What he didn't know was that the waitress refilling his water glass held the key, and the words she would soon translate would not confirm his lineage. They would obliterate it. Layla's journey to that vault began 6 years earlier in a cramped university library in Cairo, where she first learned to read the dead. Her professor, a weary-eyed scholar named Dr. Ibrahim Khalil, had pulled her aside after a lecture on Umayyad-era manuscripts. He told her she possessed a gift he had seen only twice in 40 years. She could not merely translate classical Arabic. She could feel the intent behind the words. She understood the scribe's hand, the cultural nuance, the coded metaphors that baffled even seasoned researchers. Layla was on track to become one of the region's leading manuscript experts when the phone call came that shattered everything. Her mother's voice trembled on the line. Her father, a construction worker, had fallen from scaffolding in Abu Dhabi. His spine was crushed. He would never walk again. Medical bills piled into numbers Layla couldn't comprehend, let alone pay. Within a month, her university savings were drained. Within 2, she had dropped out and moved to Dubai, chasing the only thing that could keep her family from destitution: money. The girl who once deciphered 12th century trade records was now memorizing coffee orders and pretending not to hear the casual insults of wealthy patrons. She sent 90% of her salary home every month. Her brothers stayed in school. Her father received his treatments. And Layla buried her dreams so deep, she sometimes forgot they had ever existed. But the mind does not forget what it loves. On quiet nights after double shifts, she would pull out her phone and red-scan manuscripts from museum archives, translating them in her head just to keep the skill alive. She told no one. What would be the point? She was a waitress now, and waitresses didn't get second chances. Across Dubai, in a penthouse overlooking the Persian Gulf, Sheikh Rahman bin Zayed Al Farouk lived trapped inside a different kind of prison. He was 61 years old, worth an estimated $4.8 billion, with holdings spanning real estate, logistics, and energy. He owned a private island, a fleet of cars, and an art collection that rivaled small museums. But at night, when the staff retired and the sprawling residence fell silent, he retreated to a single room secured behind a vault door with a 12-digit code. Inside, resting on a climate-controlled pedestal, lay a manuscript bound in cracked leather. It was 819 years old, written by his ancestor, the founder of the Al Farouk dynasty. The manuscript had been passed down through generations with a single, terrifying instruction: it contains the truth of our bloodline. Guard it. Only when the time is right may it be read. But the last person who could read it had died in 1793. The language was an obscure dialect of classical Arabic, mixed with a personal cipher so complex that 3 different translation teams had given up over the decades. 2 linguistic experts from Oxford had spent a full year in the 1980s attempting to crack its opening pages. They failed. The sheikh had grown obsessed with the manuscript's contents, convinced it contained proof of an unbroken royal lineage tracing back to the prophet's companions. That lineage was his identity, his power. His legacy: he had no children. His wife Fatima had passed away 12 years earlier from a rare blood disorder. Without an heir, the Sheikh's younger brother, a man named Tariq, stood next in line for the family fortune. Tariq was charming and ruthless, and he had spent years whispering to anyone who would listen that his brother's obsession with the manuscript had become madness. The cousins circled. The business partners grew nervous. The Sheikh knew that if he died without proving the purity of his line, his empire would fracture. The manuscript was the key, but the key remained locked inside itself, unreadable. Then came the evening that changed everything. Sheikh Rahman had dined at Al Munira, a restaurant so exclusive that reservations were booked 6 months in advance, and the minimum spend per person exceeded most people's monthly rent. He was seated in a private alcove, veiled by silk curtains, attended by a chef flown in from Paris that morning. Layla was assigned to his table as a secondary server, tasked with refilling water glasses and clearing plates. She was invisible as always. The Sheikh was speaking to a guest, a visiting dignitary from Jordan, when the conversation turned to old poetry. The dignitary quoted a line from Al-Mutanabi, the 10th century poet known for his labyrinthine verses. Sheikh, wanting to impress, offered a brief interpretation that was technically incorrect. Layla didn't mean to correct him. The words slipped out before she could stop them. She quietly said the actual meaning, in flawless classical Arabic, citing a secondary interpretation from a 13th century commentary. The table fell silent. The Sheikh turned to look at her, really look at her for the first time. He asked a question, then another. Within 5 minutes, he had abandoned his guest entirely. Layla stood frozen as this billionaire interrogated her on syntax, paleography, and the phonetic evolution of medieval Hijazi script. She answered everything correctly. By the end of the meal, the Sheikh had made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. The invitation arrived the next morning. A black car waited outside her shared apartment in Deira. Her roommates stared as she climbed inside, convinced she was in some kind of trouble. The car drove her not to the restaurant, but to the Sheikh's private estate, a compound so vast it required its own internal road system. Guards opened gates, staff bowed, and then Layla found herself standing before that vault door, watching Sheikh Rahman enter his 12-digit code with trembling fingers. He turned to her and spoke words she would never forget. "I have waited 30 years for someone who can read what is inside this room. If you succeed, I will pay you more money than you have ever seen. But I must warn you, once you start reading, you cannot unlearn what you discover." The vault door hissed open. Inside, bathed in soft amber light, the manuscript waited. Layla stepped forward. The air was cold. Her heart pounded. She had no idea that within the next hour, she would read a secret that had been buried for 8 centuries, and that secret would bring a billionaire to his knees. The air inside the vault was so cold Layla could see her breath. She stepped forward slowly, her eyes adjusting to the amber glow that bathed the manuscript like it was a living thing. It rested on a pedestal carved from marble, its leather cover cracked into patterns that looked like riverbeds seen from the sky. Sheikh Rahman stood behind her, his breathing shallow. He did not speak. He didn't have to. She could feel his desperation pressing against her back. Layla reached into her memory and found the training she thought she'd lost. Dr. Khalil's voice echoed in her mind. "You don't just read the words. You listen to the scribe. You ask what he was afraid of." She pulled on a pair of white cotton gloves that had been set beside the manuscript, her fingers steady now. She opened the cover. The first page was a colophon, an introduction written in iron gall ink that had oxidized to a deep brown. She began to read aloud, her voice quiet but certain. "In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, I am Yusuf ibn Rashid al-Farouk, scribe of this record, writing in the year 621 after the Hijra. I set down the truth of our house so that generations yet unborn may know who they are and from where they came." The Sheikh inhaled sharply. 621 AH. That was the year 1224 in the Western calendar. He had spent decades wondering what his ancestor had written, and now, in a voice that still carried the dust of a Yemeni village, a waitress was breathing life into those dead words. Layla continued. For 40 minutes, she translated page after page of genealogical records, names, marriages, land purchases, allegiances sworn to sultans. The lineage stretched back unbroken, just as the sheikh had always believed. His grandfathers had been emirs. Their grandfathers had been warriors. Their grandfathers before them had walked beside the companions of the Prophet. Sheikh Rahman's chest swelled. This was it. This was the proof he'd spent 30 years chasing. His blood, his legacy, his empire, all of it vindicated. But then Layla turned a page and stopped. The script had changed. The elegant cursive of the genealogist gave way to something smaller, tighter, as if the scribe was afraid of being caught writing what came next. The letters were not standard Arabic. They were encoded. A personal cipher, and Layla recognized it immediately. She had seen similar patterns in a 9th century medical text Dr. Carlyle had assigned her years ago. It was a substitution cipher where certain words were replaced by poetic metaphors. Moon child, thirsty soil, the stranger's gift. She whispered the terms aloud, her brow furrowing. Sheikh Rahman stepped closer. What is it? What does it say? Layla's heart began to pound. She didn't answer right away. She was too busy decoding, her mind racing through the linguistic gymnastics the scribe had used to hide what he really meant. The words began to form sentences in her head, and the sentences began to form a picture, and the picture was nothing like the sheikh had imagined. The famines came, she read slowly, translating the cipher in real time. The rains failed. The locusts ate our fields. Our children died. Our women wept. The house of Al-Farouq was left without an heir. The bloodline would end. And so we took unto us the children of the famine, the orphans of our fallen kin, the children of the stranger who perished at our gate. We fed them. We clothed them. We called them our own, though their blood was not our blood. We bound them with love, for love is the only lineage that outlasts the grave. The vault fell silent. Sheikh Rahman took a step backward, his hand clutching the edge of the pedestal. His face, once flushed with pride, had gone gray. No, he whispered. That is a mistranslation. You have misread the cipher. Layla turned to him, her eyes full of something he had not expected. Pity. I haven't misread it, Sheikh Rahman. I can show you the linguistic evidence. The phrase moon child is used in 3 other medieval texts to mean an adopted child whose biological parents are unknown. It's a euphemism. The scribe used it deliberately to protect the family from shame while still preserving the truth. Your ancestor didn't want this secret to be lost, but he also didn't want it to be shouted from the rooftops. The sheikh's world was crumbling. For 6 decades, he had built his identity on the unshakable conviction that he was the product of an unbroken chain of noble blood. He had made business decisions based on that belief. He had denied his brother's claims to authority based on that belief. He had looked down on others whose lineages were less pure. And now this woman, this waitress who corrected poetry, was telling him that his bloodline was not a river, but a patchwork quilt stitched together by compassion during a famine 8 centuries ago. But Layla wasn't finished. She turned another page and her eyes widened. There was more. The manuscript continued with medical records, detailed observations of a condition that had plagued the original bloodline for generations, a bleeding sickness. The scribe described it with chilling precision. Men who bled from small wounds for days, women who died in childbirth from hemorrhages they could not stop. The condition was hereditary, passed from father to daughter, from mother to son. The Al-Farouq blood carried a curse, and the only reason the family line had survived at all was because, during that great famine, they had adopted children whose blood was clean. The orphans had grown up, married into the family, and their healthy genes had diluted the deadly strain. The pure bloodline the sheikh had worshipped was a death sentence. The mixed bloodline was the salvation. Sheikh Rahman sank onto a wooden stool in the corner of the vault. His head dropped into his hands. His wife Fatima had died 12 years ago from a rare blood disorder. The doctors had never been able to fully explain it. Now he understood. It was his family's legacy. His blood, the blood he had been so proud of, had killed the woman he loved. Layla didn't know what to say. She stood there, the manuscript open before her, the secret of 800 years bare and bleeding on the page. Outside the vault, the sun was setting over Dubai, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Inside, a billionaire wept, but secrets have a way of escaping locked rooms. Unbeknownst to Sheikh Rahman, his younger brother Tariq had been watching the estate with a hawk's patience. Tariq had cultivated informants among the household staff for years, paying drivers and housekeepers for fragments of information. The moment Layla entered the vault, a message was sent. When the hours stretched on with no word, Tariq knew something significant was happening. He summoned his advisors that same evening. If the manuscript undermined his brother's claim to pure lineage, Tariq could use it to seize control. The family council, a body of 12 elder relatives, had long been divided. Half supported the sheikh, half were loyal to Tariq. A revelation of impure blood could tip the balance overnight. While the sheikh sat in his vault confronting the ashes of his identity, Tariq was already making phone calls. He contacted a prominent journalist who owed him favors. He contacted the family's chief legal advisor, a man who had served 3 generations and knew where every skeleton was buried. By midnight, he had drafted a petition to be presented to the council, demanding that Sheikh Rahman step down on grounds of illegitimacy. The sheikh had no direct heir. His claim to the throne of the family empire rested entirely on the fiction of an unbroken bloodline. If that fiction was shattered, Tariq argued, the entire foundation of Al Farouk Enterprises would crumble unless a rightful successor was installed immediately, and Tariq intended to be that successor. But then something happened that even Tariq's network failed to intercept. Layla, unable to sleep after the events of the day, returned to the manuscript early the next morning with Sheikh Rahman's permission. Something had been nagging at her. The cipher passage about the stranger's child had a marginal note she had not fully examined, written in even smaller script and almost faded beyond recognition. She used a magnifying glass from the Sheikh's library to study it. The note was a single line, added years after the original writing by a different hand. It read, "The child of the stranger was of the house of Banu Hashim, and his descendants walk among us still." Layla felt the floor tilt beneath her. Banu Hashim, that was the clan of the Prophet Muhammad. If the manuscript was accurate, the adopted orphans from the famine included a child with a lineage that traced back to the most sacred bloodline in Islamic history. This was not just a family secret. This was a secret that could reshape religious and political allegiances across the region. And Tariq, in his rush to tear down his brother, was about to expose it to the world. The marginal note was barely 2 centimeters long, but it detonated inside Layla's mind with the force of a buried bomb. Banu Hashim, the clan of the Prophet. She read the line again, then a third time, her throat so dry she could barely swallow. If this was true, the Al Farouk family had not merely adopted some hungry orphans during a famine. They had taken in a child who carried the most revered bloodline in Islamic history, and that child's descendants had intermarried with the family for 8 centuries. The secret was no longer about whether the sheikh's lineage was pure. It was about what kind of purity he had been given. His ancestors had preserved a sacred lineage without even knowing it. And now his brother was about to weaponize the very text that contained this miracle. Layla closed the manuscript with trembling hands. She had to tell Sheikh Rahman what she had found, and she had to tell him before Tariq made his next move. But she was no longer just a translator. She was now the keeper of a secret that could send shockwaves through religious institutions, political alliances, and the delicate balance of power within one of the wealthiest families on earth. The sheikh had hired her to read a book. She had not signed up to hold the fuse of a powder keg. She found him in his private prayer room, a circular chamber with walls inlaid with lapis lazuli and verses from the Quran carved in gold leaf. He was on his knees, his forehead touching the prayer mat, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For a man who commanded boardrooms and bent governments to his will, he looked utterly broken. Layla waited at the threshold, unsure if she should intrude. But he sensed her presence and turned, his eyes red-rimmed and raw. She had seen that look before on her father's face, the day the doctors told him he would never walk again. It was the look of a man whose foundation had been ripped away. She knelt beside him and spoke softly. "Sheikh Rahman, there is something more, something I did not see yesterday. The manuscript contains a marginal note, added later from a different scribe. It identifies one of the adopted orphans, the child of the stranger." The sheikh wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "What does it matter? The bloodline is broken. My whole life has been built on a lie. My brother will use this to destroy me, and perhaps I deserve it." Layla shook her head. The lie was not the impurity. The lie was believing that purity was all that mattered. But the child, Sheikh, the stranger's child, he was from Banu Hashim. Silence. The words hung in the air like incense smoke. The Sheikh's expression shifted through confusion, disbelief, and then a kind of stunned wonder. Banu Hashim was not merely a noble lineage. It was the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Countless families across the Islamic world claimed descent from it, most without proof. But if this manuscript was authentic, if the marginal note could be verified, then the Al-Farouq family did not just have a link to that sacred line. They had sheltered it, raised it, married it into their own. Their blood was not diluted, it was elevated. But there was a problem. The manuscript had been private for 800 years. No scholar outside the family had ever examined it. To prove the Banu Hashim connection, they would need to bring in independent experts, carbon dating, paleographic authentication, DNA analysis, comparing known descendants of the Prophet to living members of the Al-Farouq family. And that process would take months, perhaps years. Meanwhile, Tariq was moving. Across the city, Tariq Al-Farouq was holding a meeting in his own palatial home, a modernist glass structure that overlooked the Dubai Marina. He was 56, lean and sharp-jawed, with the kind of charm that made people forget they were being manipulated. Gathered in his study were three key figures. First, Khalid Noorani, the family's legal advisor for 37 years, a man who knew every clause of every trust, every weakness in every contract. Second, Samira Haddad, a journalist with a major regional news network, known for her aggressive investigative reporting. Third, Omar Al-Farouq, the eldest of the 12 family council members, a cousin who had long resented Sheikh Rahman's authority. Tariq had not yet told them about the manuscript's content. He only knew that something had been discovered, something that had shaken his brother to his core. He intended to exploit that vulnerability before anyone could regroup. "Gentleman and lady," Tariq began, leaning forward with practiced gravity, "what I am about to tell you must remain confidential until I give the signal. My brother has spent 3 decades guarding a manuscript that supposedly proves our family's noble lineage. Yesterday, he brought a waitress into his vault to translate it. And from what my sources tell me, the translation did not go as he hoped. He emerged from that vault looking like a ghost. He has not eaten since. He has not left the estate. Something in that manuscript has broken him." Samira leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What did it say?" "That is what we need to find out," Tariq replied. "But I suspect it challenges the legitimacy of our bloodline. Perhaps reveals a flaw, a break, a shame. Whatever it is, it undermines my brother's entire claim to lead this family. The council has tolerated his obsession for years, but if he has been hiding a secret that damages the Al-Farouq name, he must step down." Omar stroked his beard slowly. "You are asking us to move against him without knowing the full truth. That is a gamble, Tariq." "It is an opportunity," Tariq countered. "The full truth is in that vault, and I intend to make it public. Once the world knows, he will have no choice but to resign, and the council will need a new leader. Someone who will protect the family's reputation, not obsess over dusty books." He did not say what everyone in the room already knew, that he intended to be that leader, that he had been waiting for this moment for years, and that once he controlled the family's assets, he would restructure the empire in ways that left his brother with nothing but memories. But Samira had a journalist's instinct for the bigger story. She had covered the Al-Farouq family for a decade, and she knew that a simple legitimacy battle, while juicy, would not sustain global headlines. "Tariq, if this manuscript really shakes the foundation of your family's history, we need to frame it carefully. We can't just leak that the sheikh read something sad and cried. We need the actual text. We need to know exactly what it says." Tariq nodded, his smile thin. "I am working on that. The waitress is the key. She is the only one who can read it. We need to get to her." What Tariq did not yet know was that his sources had failed him again. The marginal note about Banu Hashim had been discovered after the initial leak reached him. He was preparing a campaign to expose a tainted bloodline, unaware that he was about to reveal a lineage more sacred than anything the family had ever claimed. The irony was staggering, and it would soon turn his ambush into a trap of his own making. Meanwhile, Sheikh Rahman had made a decision. He would not fight the revelation, he would embrace it. For 30 years, he had guarded the manuscript out of fear, fear of what it might say, fear of losing his status, fear of proving his enemies right. But now that the worst had come to pass, he felt something unexpected: relief. The weight of secrecy, the decades of paranoia and obsession, had lifted. The truth was finally out of the box, and he could choose how to respond to it. Turned to Layla with a new resolve in his eyes. "I want you to translate the entire manuscript, every page, every marginal note, every cipher and poem and prayer. I want the complete truth, nothing omitted. We will publish it. We will share it with the world. If my ancestors adopted children out of compassion, then compassion is the legacy I must honor, not blood purity. And if that adopted child truly came from Banu Hashim, then this is a story of divine providence, not shame." Layla felt a swell of emotion she could not name. This was why she had studied archaeology, not for money or prestige, but for moments like this, when the past reached through centuries and transformed the present. She agreed to stay. The work would take weeks. The sheikh offered her a room in the estate and a salary that made her previous life feel like a fever dream. She called her family that night, her voice shaking as she told them what was happening. Her father wept. Her mother prayed. Her brothers cheered. For the first time in 6 years, Layla was not just surviving, she was alive. The translation work began at dawn the next morning and continued for 22 days. Layla worked 12-hour shifts, her fingers tracing the ancient ink, her mind unraveling the scribe's intricate cipher. Each day brought new revelations. The manuscript was not just a genealogy, it was a chronicle of conscience. Yusuf ibn Rashid, the original scribe, had wrestled with the decision to conceal the adoption. He had recorded arguments he had with his own wife, who insisted that the truth mattered less than love. She read of the famine's devastation, how entire villages had emptied, how mothers left their dying children at the gates of wealthier homes, begging for their survival. She read of the Al-Faruq matriarch, a woman named Amina, who had personally nursed the stranger's child alongside her own son, refusing to let either one perish. That child had grown into a scholar, a jurist, a man who became known throughout the region for his wisdom and piety. His name was Ibrahim, and his biological father, the stranger who died at the Al-Faruq gate, was recorded in the margin as a traveler from Medina of the house of Hashim. The genealogical evidence was compelling. The geographic details matched historical accounts of a Hashemite family that had fled Medina during a period of political turmoil in the early 13th century. The traveler's name, Abdullah ibn Hassan, appeared in other historical records as a descendant of the Prophet through the line of Hassan ibn Ali. The puzzle pieces were falling into place with terrifying precision. While Layla worked, Tariq's campaign accelerated. He had not yet obtained the manuscript's content, but he had obtained something else: a leaked photograph of the sheikh weeping in his prayer room, taken by a compromised security guard. Samira Haddad ran the image on the front page of her news network's website with the headline, "Billionaire Sheikh breaks down after secret manuscript revealed." The story went viral within hours. Speculation exploded across social media. Was the sheikh terminally ill? Had the manuscript revealed criminal secrets? Was the Al-Faruq empire about to collapse? The stock price of the family's publicly traded holding company dropped 6% in a single day. The council demanded an emergency meeting. Tariq had his chaos, but he did not yet have his victory, because 3 days later, Layla completed her translation, and the sheikh prepared to release the full truth to the world. Not through a leak or a scandal, but through a press conference that would be broadcast live to every major network on the planet. He sent word to the family council, to Tariq, to Samira, to anyone who would listen. He would address them all at the grand ballroom of the Emirates Palace, on a date that was now only 48 hours away. Tariq, believing he had already won, accepted the invitation with a predator's grin. He had no idea what was coming. The grand ballroom of the Emirates Palace was a cathedral of marble and gold. 800 chairs had been arranged in precise rows, and every single one was occupied. Journalists from 37 countries had flown in. News vans with satellite dishes crowded the parking lot. Inside, the atmosphere was electric, a hum of speculation and anticipation that vibrated through the crystal chandeliers. In the front row sat the 12 members of the family council, their expressions ranging from grim to curious to openly hostile. Omar Al-Farouk, Tariq's ally, whispered into his phone. Khalid Nourani, the legal advisor, reviewed a stack of documents. Samira Haddad had positioned herself in the press section with a direct feed to her news desk, ready to break whatever story emerged. And in the center of it all, on a modest stage with a single podium, stood Sheikh Rahman bin Zayed Al Farouk. He wore a simple white thobe, no golden trim, no ostentatious accessories. Beside him, seated quietly in a chair that had been placed deliberately within the camera frame, was Layla. She wore a dark blue hijab and a calm expression that belied the storm inside her. The Sheikh had insisted she be present. She had translated the manuscript. She had unearthed the truth. She deserved to witness what came next. Tariq entered the ballroom last, as he had planned. He walked down the center aisle with the swagger of a man who believed his victory was already secured. He nodded to council members. He flashed a smile at Samira. He took his seat in the front row, directly facing his brother, and folded his arms with theatrical patience. He had drafted a response to whatever weak explanation the Sheikh might offer. He had prepared a motion for the council to vote on immediately after the speech. By sunset, he believed he would be the head of the Al Farouk family. He was wrong about everything. Sheikh Rahman adjusted the microphone and began to speak. His voice was steady, unhurried, the voice of a man who had made peace with whatever judgment awaited him. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, I stand before you today not as a billionaire or a businessman. I stand before you as a son. A son who has spent 30 years trying to understand his father and his father's father and all the fathers who came before. Many of you know that my family has guarded a manuscript for 8 centuries. It was written by my ancestor, Yusuf ibn Rashid al-Farouk, in the year 1224. I have kept it locked in a vault, refusing to let anyone read it until I could be certain of its contents. I was afraid. I was afraid that it might reveal something shameful, something that would destroy my family's reputation. And so I hid it. I let my fear control me. That was my mistake. He paused. The room was utterly silent. Even Tariq had stopped fidgeting. 3 weeks ago, I met a young woman named Layla Hassan. She was working as a waitress, but that is not who she is. She is a scholar, a linguist, a woman who, despite enormous hardship, never forgot the knowledge she had gained. I asked her to read the manuscript, and she did. She read every word, and what she found changed everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, and the meaning of legacy. The Sheikh reached beneath the podium and produced a leather-bound folder containing Layla's complete translation. He held it up for the cameras. The manuscript reveals that 800 years ago, during a great famine that devastated this region, the Al Farouk family faced extinction. Disease and hunger had claimed many of their children. The bloodline was failing, and so my ancestors made a choice. They opened their doors to orphans, children whose parents had died, children who had nowhere else to go. They adopted them. They raised them as their own. They gave them the Al Farouk name not because of blood, but because of love. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Tariq leaned forward, sensing his moment approaching. This was the shame he had anticipated. Adoption, impurity, a broken lineage. He opened his mouth to interrupt, but the Sheikh raised a hand. I know what some of you are thinking, the Sheikh continued. You think this is a scandal. You think this proves that our bloodline is not what we claimed. And you are right, it is not what we claimed. The Al Farouk blood is not pure in the way I once believed. But here is what you do not yet know. One of the orphans, a child found at our family's gate, was the son of a traveler who had died of exhaustion after fleeing political persecution. That traveler was from Medina. His name was Abdullah ibn Hassan, and he was a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, through the line of Imam Hassan. The ballroom erupted. Journalists leaped from their seats. Camera flashes strobed like lightning. Council members turned to each other with expressions of disbelief. Samira Haddad's jaw dropped. She had come expecting a story about a billionaire's shame. She was witnessing instead a revelation of sacred lineage that could make global headlines for months. Tariq's face went pale. He realized in an instant that his entire strategy had been built on a catastrophic miscalculation. He had positioned himself to attack his brother for hiding a shameful secret. But the secret was not shameful. The secret was holy. And by forcing this public disclosure, he had handed his brother the greatest triumph of his life. Sheikh Rahman pressed forward, his voice now thick with emotion. My ancestors did not dilute our bloodline, they elevated it. They took in a child of the Prophet's own family and raised him as their son. That child grew up to become a scholar. His descendants intermarried with the Al-Farouks for generations. The blood that runs in my veins, the blood that I once feared was tainted, is blessed. And the manuscript that I hid for 30 years contains the proof. Independent scholars have examined it. The carbon dating is consistent with the 13th century. The paleography is authentic. The genealogical records match other historical documents from the period. This is not a claim. This is documented history. He turned to look at Layla. She met his eyes and nodded, tears streaming down her face. This was why she had survived the years of struggle. This was why she had memorized coffee orders and endured the insults of wealthy patrons. Not for a paycheck. For this moment, when truth broke through centuries of silence and changed everything. But there is more, the sheikh said, and the room quieted again. The manuscript also contains medical records. My ancestors suffered from a hereditary bleeding disorder. It killed many of them. My own wife, Fatima, may she rest in peace, died from a blood condition that doctors could not fully explain. I believe now that my lineage carried this disease, and the only reason my family survived at all is because those adopted children brought healthy genes into our line. The orphans saved us. We did not save them, they saved us. The irony was absolute. The purity of blood the sheikh had worshipped was a death sentence. The mixed lineage he had feared was the salvation. Compassion had healed what pride would have destroyed. The speech concluded, but the drama was far from over. As the sheikh stepped back from the podium, Tariq rose to his feet. The council members watched him, waiting to see what he would do. He had spent years plotting against his brother. He had leaked photographs, planted stories, manipulated allies. And now every weapon he had prepared had been rendered useless. He could not attack a man who had just revealed a sacred lineage. He could not call for a vote of no confidence when the room was still ringing with applause. He had been outmaneuvered not by strategy, but by truth. He approached the stage slowly, his face unreadable. The security guards tensed, but Tariq did not attack. He extended his hand. In front of 800 witnesses and millions watching around the world, he shook his brother's hand. And then he did something no one expected. He apologized. The words were quiet, almost lost in the ambient noise of the ballroom, but the microphones caught them. I was wrong. I am sorry. Sheikh Rahman embraced his brother. Two men who had been enemies for decades stood together on that stage, united by a manuscript that had shattered one illusion and revealed another. The council erupted in applause. The journalists filed their stories. Samira Haddad delivered a live report that would become the most-watched segment in her network's history. In the weeks that followed, the Al-Farouk family transformed. The manuscript was donated to the National Archives of the United Arab Emirates, where it became one of the most studied documents in the nation's history. Universities from around the world requested access to Layla's translation. The sheikh established the Al-Farouk Foundation for Interfaith Understanding, funded with $200 million of his personal fortune. Its mission was to promote the shared heritage of the Abrahamic faiths, inspired by the story of a Muslim family that had sheltered an orphan and been blessed for it. Layla received a fellowship to complete her doctorate at the University of Oxford, fully funded by the foundation. Her father received the best medical care money could buy. Her brothers graduated with honors. And every time she visited the sheikh, now a friend rather than an employer, she remembered standing in that cold vault, terrified of what she might find. What she found had changed the world. But the final surprising detail, the one that even Layla did not expect, came 3 months later. A genetic study was conducted comparing the DNA of living Al-Farouk family members to known descendants of the Prophet Muhammad from other verified lineages. Results confirmed a genetic link consistent with the manuscript's account. The Banu Hashim connection was real. The orphan's blood truly did flow in the sheikh's veins. Science had corroborated the scribe's confession, and the 800-year-old secret was a secret no longer. It was a legacy of love that had outlasted famine and war and the pride of men. That legacy didn't just rewrite one family's history. It posed a question that now echoes through every gilded hall in Dubai. How many other vaults are hiding truths that would shatter the stories powerful families tell about themselves? How many manuscripts still sit unread because the right eyes have never fallen upon them? Sheikh Rahman spent 30 years guarding a secret he believed would destroy him. In the end, it set him free. But the path to that freedom ran through a waitress who had been forced to abandon her dreams, a woman the world had overlooked, until the moment she became irreplaceable. Layla's story is not just about a translation. It is about what happens when knowledge is buried, not by time, but by circumstance. The girl who corrected a poem while refilling a water glass held the key to an 800-year-old mystery. She held it silently for years, scrubbing dishes, memorizing orders, sending every spare dirham home to a family that was counting on her. There are countless others like her. Brilliant minds hidden in plain sight, waiting for a single moment of recognition that may never come. The manuscript survived famine, war, and the pride of men who feared the truth. But it almost didn't survive the distance between a waitress's hands and the vault where it lay waiting. Sheikh Rahman now speaks often about his late wife Amira, about the blood disorder that took her, and about the strange mercy of discovering that the very lineage he had worshipped was the force that made his family vulnerable. He has funded genetic research into hereditary blood diseases, partnering with hospitals from Abu Dhabi to London, hoping that the medical records in that ancient manuscript might help modern doctors understand conditions that still puzzle them. The orphans, adopted 8 centuries ago, didn't just save a family name. They injected healthy genes into a line that would have otherwise perished. That is not a footnote. That is a testament to the resilience that comes from opening doors rather than closing them. And what of Tariq, the brother who schemed to destroy him? Their reconciliation was not instant, nor was it perfect. Trust broken over decades does not heal in a single handshake. But the foundation they now run together, the Al-Farouq Foundation for Interfaith Understanding, is built on the very truth Tariq once planned to weaponize. He had intended to expose impurity and instead uncovered sacred lineage. The universe has a way of punishing malice with irony. In this case, it punished him by handing him everything he wanted, but only after he had surrendered the bitterness that made him want it. The manuscript now rests in the National Archives, viewable by any scholar or citizen who wishes to see it. Layla visits sometimes, standing before the climate-controlled case, remembering the cold vault and the trembling billionaire and the moment her finger touched that marginal note. She is Dr. Hassan now. Her dissertation on the cipher techniques of 13th-century Arabian genealogists has become required reading in universities across 3 continents. Her brothers, Ahmed and Omar, have both entered medical school, funded by scholarships from the foundation. Her sister Layla, the artist, is curating an exhibition on the visual history of Islamic manuscript illumination. The family that once depended on her survival now thrives because of her courage. But the deepest truth is this: the manuscript did not change what the Al-Farouqs were. It revealed what they had always been. Long before the Sheikh obsessed over blood purity, his ancestors had already answered the question of what makes a family. They chose love over lineage. They fed children who were not their own. They erased the boundary between stranger and son, and that erasure became the hidden miracle that preserved their house for 800 years. The manuscript was not a verdict. It was a mirror. So we are left with the question that every story like this forces us to ask ourselves: what vaults are we guarding? What truths have we locked away because we fear what they might say about who we are? And who, in our own lives, is carrying a gift we have failed to see because they wear a server's uniform or speak with an accent or come from a place we have been taught to dismiss? Layla Hassan was invisible until she was. Sheikh Rahman was imprisoned by pride until pride became impossible. Both of them walked out of that vault as different people. The manuscript, 8 centuries old, changed everything in a single afternoon. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that inheritance is not about blood. It is about who you choose to love. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story of hidden truths and unexpected heroes. And comment below, where in the world are you watching from today? We read every response and your voice matters. Thank you for being here. Until next time, keep your eyes open. The next world-changing secret might be sitting at a table near you, waiting for someone to finally listen.